Hello, I'm Marsha Bonhart. Welcome to the Dayton Mayoral Candidates Forum, brought to you by the Dayton Weekly News. This is Dayton's longest running African-American news publication. Now, we've invited all of the candidates to join us on Zoom to respond to a series of questions and issues on the minds of citizens of Dayton. Welcome. And we say hello to Gary Leitzell and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks.
Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, running for mayor again. And there have been, yeah. There have been a lot of changes since you were mayor. The landscape has certainly shifted a lot since 2009, 2013. And with all respect to you, I know you brought in a lot of public art and your tire buyback programs are very successful. But those kinds of things are probably not on the front of the minds of people anymore these days. So what are your plans now?
Well, one of the biggest complaints we're finding, people are tired of the trash in the neighborhoods and the trash on the streets, and they're still sick and tired of vacant housing. And one of the things I've always noticed is that if a neighborhood has a strong neighborhood association, those neighborhoods fare better. And I even said this back in 2013, and I think I would implement it now. We have a Neighborhood Leadership Institute class that graduates every year at the city of Dayton. And these people come out all excited, and then the city gives them nothing to do. And I think if they were to walk through some of these neighborhoods that don't have neighborhood associations, using the voter walking lists and talking to what I would call super voters, the voters in every election, and organize a meeting and start to form a neighborhood association with these groups. Basically you say, we're gonna have a meeting at such and such a park or such and such a church, come, and our plan is in 3 months to have a charter, bylaws, and you're going to elect a president, a vice president, treasurer, secretary in 3 months. And then we're going to coach you through the next 9 months. We're going to do 3 cleanups, 3 cookouts, and groom you to be a successful neighborhood association so that you can come out and take care of some of your neighborhood issues. I've also said that with regards to police reform, if we went back to community policing in the same way, if we had a beat cop assigned to a neighborhood and they would go and knock on the doors of those super voters, these are the people with civic pride that care about the community, that would start to build trust in those communities with law enforcement and the city. It's a very simple process to do. It doesn't cost any money because the lists are public information. And it's just something that I've definitely noticed going around campaigning this year. We are specifically talking to people that we know will vote in every election. And these are civic-minded people. And I think that we need to give them their hope and their pride back.
So you made this kind of progress in all of Dayton's neighborhoods?
We haven't hit all of them yet. I mean, I've targeted the neighborhoods where I know that, because it's, in these primaries, only a certain number of people vote. It's very low. So I have targeted the neighborhoods that I know that I will do exceptionally well in. And now I am going and into Westwood and Madden Hills and Princeton Heights, and to show people that I'm there for them too.
So you say the high crime areas, that people don't vote in the so-called high crime areas? I
didn't say anything about high crime. It's amazing. In 2013, only 10,058 people voted in that primary. And of those 10,058 people, there's only about 7,000 left in the city. So that means 3,000 voters have moved out of the city, gone somewhere else. And it probably means that 3,000 more have moved in, but I have no way of identifying who those new voters are. When we're knocking on doors, we may walk past 20 houses before we come to another person who is a civic-minded super voter. It is absolutely horrible to go through these neighborhoods and see how many people do not vote in these off-year primaries.
I think that's national. I don't think it's so much an issue in Dayton. I think that if you take a look at it, I think that happens nationally for whatever reason. But I thought I heard, perhaps I was wrong. You said something, you equated crime with voting, crime areas with voting.
I didn't say anything about, I've said nothing about crime. I said what we need to do for community policing is to have beat officers go and knock on the doors of the super voters.
Yeah, I did hear that.
Right.
Okay.
because
Right.
those are the civic-minded people who want to have that conversation.
So forgive me if I thought I heard you mention you placed crime areas with voting. Forgive me.
No,
All right. So you took over when the city was listed as one of the country's fastest dying cities.
mhm.
Was it improved during your tenure?
Yeah, by 2012, we were the most livable city, the best. I'm trying to think. Forbes labeled us. There were three things: the most livable or most affordable, the best for the arts, and there was something else. I have it on my. I have a blog site, DaytonMayor.blogspot.com, and in 2013, I wrote about these things. You can also go to GoGaryGo.com, which is my website, and then at the top right-hand corner, you can link to the blog. But yeah, we went from fastest dying to most affordable, best for job opportunities or something, and our housing stock was good. I mean, and it only took a couple of years. And I think a lot of that was just basically people felt that the change in leadership was good. You had an open-minded person who was willing to try things that no one else had done. I was willing to fail. And I think we've lost that in the last 8 years. We have a leadership that doesn't want to fail. They focus primarily on downtown. They've given up on the neighborhoods, which is sad. And I think people want this change back.
And you know, it's interesting that you mentioned that because that segues into my next question. When we were talking about downtown Dayton, and it's certainly, as you mentioned, it's seen a rebirth and development, and with the arcade, upscale housing, commercial developments, and a lot of that was subsidized by city dollars. So citizens are saying, as you indicated, that they're expressing concerns that that the neighboring communities are not going to get that kind of development. So what do you think can be done to give communities within the city that kind of development and still maintain a good economic survival rate for the city?
We just have to refocus our attention back on the neighborhood priorities. When I was mayor the first time, we had development everywhere around the city. I mean, I remember Germantown and Broadway, those townhouses went up. We moved the food bank over to Germantown. We did Wolf Creek. Wolf Creek looked like a war zone in 2009. And by 2013, we had all kinds of development there. We did some development in Twin Towers. And as that was going on, we started doing the development downtown. And that all initiated in those 4 years that I was mayor, and then it continued. And I just think that the current leadership focused it all on downtown, failing to realize that you need to give some to the neighborhoods to appease the people. So I just think under new leadership, we would focus on putting some of that money into efforts in the community. I was reading about the American Rescue Plan money, the $147 million that's supposed to come to Dayton, and what it can be used for. And it does say it can be used for infrastructure. And one of the infrastructure things we've talked about for years was citywide Wi-Fi, which may be beneficial, especially with the COVID and the schools, kids having to learn from home. And I did preach in 2010 that Dayton Public Schools should look at a hybrid school model. And had they listened to me back in 2010, they would have been ready for the whole COVID thing now. They would have been in a position to have handled it. But I expect that most of
quickly, because you were sort of ahead of your time in terms of talking about a hybrid model. What made you think of a hybrid model in 2010?
My daughter was using Ohio Virtual Academy for school at the time, which was a publicly funded charter school, but all of her lessons were online. And for us, it was a lifestyle choice because we could. My family lived in England at the time. We went to England. She could still do schoolwork on the computer as long as we had access to Wi-Fi. When I was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors in D.C. in January, we took my daughter and my wife, and she would do her schoolwork, and then they would go off to the Smithsonian while I was doing the mayor meetings. So she had done online learning until she was 11 years old. So when COVID hit and DECA, Dayton Early College Academy, where she attends school, decided to go onto online learning, she said, "Oh, wow, I've got this. I've done it before." And so she excelled through the online learning thing. And I had asked Dayton Public Schools in 2010 to consider a hybrid school model, and I would freely enroll my daughter in that if they would allow me to teach her 2 days a week, English and math, which she was good at. And they taught her science, music, art, whatever, geography, history, everything else, the other 3 days a week. They came back and they said, we can do this, but we're not going to.
And was there a reason that they weren't going to?
I have no idea. They said, no, we're not going to do it. It was, you know, I ran into that fair amount of times in those 4 years. So.
Well, you were just speaking of the $147 million from the COVID.
Yeah, I expect that most of it will be spent before I become mayor.
What is your plan what would be your plan to invest other than, we heard one of your plans?
Federal money comes with strings attached. So it's not a case of what I want to do with it. It's what they tell me I can do with it. And from what I read yesterday, the city is going to give $2,000 to every one of their employees. That's the first thing they're going to do, because they're going to make up for the fact that they didn't get a pay raise and some of them took concessions. So every single Dayton employee is going to get $2,000. So there's probably 6 million of it right there gone. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad, but that's the first thing they're doing. And that's what it's supposed to be used for. Rental assistance, employee retention, basically to give government some of the money back that COVID has cost them for whatever they've spent it on. But it did say it can be used for infrastructure. And one of the things that it mentioned was Wi-Fi. Other than that, it's water and plumbing and electric, I'm guessing. So it comes with strings, and I don't have the documentation that says what it specifically can be used for. What I'd like to see it used for personally is I'd like to see some of our business corridors in the neighborhoods improved. But I don't think it can be used for that.
Okay, all right, thank you. When we talk about priority areas, can you let us know what you would do as mayor to ensure that the city administration reduces its number of no bid contracts and instead promotes full and open competition?
Well, one of the things that, this goes back to when I was mayor the first time, one of the reasons people don't get contracts with the city is because they're not registered with the city to do business. So they don't get the notifications, the bid notifications. And one of the reasons a lot of local companies aren't registered with the city is because they don't meet the financial requirements that the city meets. They need to be bonded, they need to have insurance, they need to have a certain amount of cash flow or money available. But what I would tell people is, if you're not qualified to do business or to be registered with the city, you need to see who's getting the bids and become a subcontractor for those companies, so that you are making the money and the money is staying local instead of going out of state to these big companies that are giving us the low bids. The city always goes with the lowest and best. They don't always go with the lowest sometimes, because the best is better than some of the lowest in terms of I guess details or commitment or ability to perform. So it's been an issue, and I talked years ago to the leadership of the NAACP about it when they complained and said we need more minority businesses doing contracts, and I challenged them. I said, go out and get more people registered, and they didn't. So okay, that's fine. If you're not going to get more people registered, let them know that they should be becoming subcontractors for these people who are getting the bids. And that's one of the reasons I had it put online right from the get-go. I mean, you can read the contract language before they vote on it now online from the city site, the agendas. And I actually had a friend who did concrete work, and that's exactly what he would do. He would see who got the bids, and he would become a subcontractor, and he got a ton of work out at the airport when they built that parking lot, or the parking garage thing. Yeah.
There's an idea, there's a thought that some of these businesses that really don't understand the politics of all that need to have some kind of support to show them what needs to be done. Because there's just a lot of people who, for lack of a better term, don't get it and don't know what they need to do. And so if there was some kind of support system to help them through that, perhaps you get a better response.
Right. I think, yeah, that's something that can definitely be done. I mean, one of the things that I learned the first 4 years, a lot of my job was giving people the information they needed. It's out there. I mean, it's like the zoning code, building codes and things like that. You know, you get permits because it's about health and safety. It's not about having someone come into your house to tell you you did something wrong. It's to make sure that you're doing the job to a C grade. And now you could do it to an A or a B too, but most contractors do a C grade just to meet the state standards of you know, electrical work, plumbing work, HVAC, gas lines, and things like that. So again, I think a lot of it is just educating people. I know a lot of people were buying property and then they'd come and complain to me because it wasn't zoned right. So I'd sit there and say, well, if you'd have looked at the zoning map before you bought the property, and if you wanted to do a certain business at a location, you're better off going to the neighborhood association first and telling them what you wanted put there and getting feedback from them, because if they aren't going to support you, there's no point in buying the building.
Knowledge is power, that's for sure.
Right. It is. Yeah. And so a lot of it was educating people on the system so that they could further themselves and better themselves. Right.
Thank you. We're going to quote a Dayton Daily News article from last year. Hundreds of members of Dayton's largest union and non-union employees won't get a pay increase in 2021 because the city is trying to grapple with pandemic-related revenue losses. Union members and Dayton leaders say they had to get creative to hold down personnel costs as the city's budget has been thrown into uncertainty because of major economic disruptions tied to COVID. Well, a few months later, the current commission, city commission, is asking voters to change the city charter to support a pay increase for the mayor and commissioners. And I'm asking now, do you agree with that charter change?
I don't just say no, I say hell no to that. Okay. And I voted no on that yesterday. I went down and early voted. And I've got it on my blog, my Facebook page. I put it out on Nextdoor. Vote hell no on that. The reason is the county commissioner salary it projected for 2022 is $109,577. And so the commissioners want 50% of that and the mayor wants 75%. That means the commissioner's salary is going to jump from $46,500 to $55,000. And the mayor's salary is going to jump from $55,000 to $82,000. Now, I'm not opposed to them tying it in with the county's salary, but I think that they're asking for too much. Maybe they should look at 45% and 55%. And what happens then is if you're reelected in 4 years, you get an automatic 5% pay increase. It's tied into a cost of living amount, but it's still a part-time job. And when I say part-time, as a mayor, I worked 40 hours a week part-time. It's not 9 to 5. So, and people have to realize that. A lot of times it was, I'm out till 9, 10 o'clock at night, or it's weekends because of ceremonial functions and things that you do. But if you pace yourself well, it's still a part-time job, or you can make it a 40-hour-a-week part-time job. So, so no, I do not support that pay increase, especially when city government people are taking a 3% cut. And I just read in the newspaper that the state's passing a bill to require the elected officials of the state to take a 2% pay cut. So it's horrendous to think that we're going to give our mayor and commissioners a 20 to 49% pay increase.
Thank you. Thank you for that opinion. Governor DeWine announced an initiative that will address minority health and racial disparities, and Mayor Whaley and the commissioners have praised his declaration that racism is a public health crisis and has declared racism as a public health emergency. So I'd like to know your thoughts on that declaration and what will you do to address the issue of racial disparity in this
Okay,
area?
well, such declarations are a first step in the movement to, I guess, to racial equality and justice. I mean, so it's a first step, and now we have to follow up. One of the things I think people need to realize is that the people really do have power. And if one of the things that the West Side wants is access to healthcare, because they took down Good Sam, the hospital, which they should never have torn down, in my opinion. And I've also made it clear that if federal or public, if tax dollars went into building that facility, we should have investigated it, because that could have held up the demolition of it. I've talked about in the past coalitions of neighborhoods. We used to have priority boards. Priority boards didn't have much power because they were controlled by the city, run by the city, and organized by the city. But if let's say Westwood, Princeton Heights, Arlington, Madden Hills, all had neighborhood associations, and the leadership formed a coalition, and they stood in front of that commission and said, we demand a clinic, some kind of health facilities on the west side of Dayton. And if you don't give it to us, we are going to tell everyone in our communities not to vote for you. They have power. And that's what I think we need to start organizing, because as mayor and commissioners, we are supposed to direct policy for the people. And I learned this from the priority boards. The city is looking to the people to direct policy, and the people are looking at the city leadership to direct policy. So we're hitting nothing. Nothing's happening because we're both looking to the other side to come up with something. But the reality is, if that's the demand from the community, it's our job to give them what they want to the best of our ability. Now, I can't necessarily make sure that a major hospital comes there, but I could certainly have a discussion with some medical professionals that might say, yeah, we can open an office over there and do well, or what incentives can government provide us with to make sure that that happens. And so I think, to answer your question, is we have to empower the people to tell us what they need so that we can move towards that equality and justice part of that equation.
I think it stands to reason what is needed, but I hear what you're saying. I think the need goes without saying. Mm-hmm. You know, if we're talking about racial disparity, then, you know, we know what those needs are. But thank you for your response. National events regarding community police relations. The city certainly underwent a 9-month police reform process that included members of the community. Do you feel this adequately addresses the issues of race relations and policing? Well,
I believe that our police should have had body cameras years ago. And I think we need an exterior oversight board, because if you have a complaint against the police, the people who review the complaint are the police. And if you appeal it, it's appealed to the police. And so they just say no. I think it would be good to have a civilian oversight board so that if you have a complaint, it's not the police that are reviewing it. It could be former police. It could be some reformed ex-felons on that board, super voters out in the community who are civic-minded individuals who can make a fair decision. And I saw that the recent case where the guy was going to buy a cup of coffee and he had cerebral palsy or something. He got some bones broken by a police officer. They're filing a suit against the city. An external oversight, but in fact, 2 external oversight boards did not agree with what the city board did. And so anyway, there's a major lawsuit going on there. Again, with police reform.
If there is an oversight board, as you indicated, what power would they have if whatever they decide, whatever they review, and then what happens after that? What power?
They would basically settle a case. If there's a lawsuit, they would say this was done wrong, and as a city, you need to settle this case. Otherwise, it'll go to court, and you're likely to lose. I mean, so many cases get pushed under the rug. Right now, you have no accountability with that city commission and the city. You have one party control, and they can do whatever they want. If they're hiring police officers and the mayor says to the chief examiner, I don't like Mr. Smith, do you think Mr. Smith's going to hire, or do you think the examiner is going to hire Mr. Smith? Because if he does, the mayor is going to tell the city manager to fire him. You have a dictatorship right now. They can do whatever they want. And if a city employee decides to be a whistleblower, they'll lose their job. This is the problem we have. You cannot, people are afraid to report the bad misdeeds or the wrongdoings for fear of losing their source of income. And we didn't have that when I was mayor, because I didn't have that power, and I didn't want that power. I just wanted to make sure everybody did the right thing. And so with an external oversight board, you're putting the power in the hands of citizens to make a recommendation back to the city versus the police just saying, we didn't do that, or that person's lying, or no, we're not going to investigate that because it's a waste of our time. They can do whatever they want. And we need to change that mentality. I'm sorry.
All right. Mr. Leitzell, thank you very much for your conversation today.
I hope I answered all your questions the way you
did.
You want them. I mean,
not how I want them. You answered,
right.
You answered them the way you feel, and that was it.
Right.
There's no opinion here.
No, I mean,
just generate conversation.
We seriously need some changes at City Hall.
Well, thank you for your opinions. We appreciate it. Thank you so much, Gary Leitzell.
Thank you. Take care.